Hey man, let's strip away the romanticized lies, the sugar-coated stories, and the comforting excuses society feeds you about why women leave one man for another so quickly. The truth is much darker and far more calculated than most men want to admit. Women don't accidentally jump from man to man. They don't just fall into someone else's arms. There's a process, an internal calculation, and it happens long before the relationship even officially ends. See, women are rarely without a safety net. The moment they feel like their emotional needs, their excitement, or their validation is dwindling in their current relationship, they subconsciously start scanning for the next branch to grab. And unlike men, who often leave and then go through a period of solitude or rebuilding, women almost always secure the next man before they let go of the current one. This is why you see women break up one day and be in another man's bed. The next, it's not because they're healing fast, it's because they lined up their replacement while you were still loyal. This is called branch swinging, and it's been around for as long as human mating behavior has existed. It's not about morality for her, it's about survival and hypergamy. Women, biologically and socially, have been wired to secure the best possible option available to them at any given time. If she senses that you're slipping in value, maybe you're struggling financially, maybe you've lost ambition, maybe you're simply too available and no longer a challenge, her subconscious alarm bells start ringing. That's when she becomes more receptive to the attention of other men. She'll start dressing differently, being more active on social media, and going out without you more often. To you, it might look like harmless independence, but in reality, she's placing herself in environments where other men can notice her, because she's testing the market for her next upgrade. And here's the coldest part, man, by the time you notice these changes, she's already emotionally invested in someone else. Women rarely make sudden jumps without an emotional runway. That friend she says you're being insecure about, that coworker who's just really funny, that guy she met at the gym who helps her with workouts, those are often the seeds being planted for her exit strategy. While you're busy trusting her because you're committed, she's mentally and emotionally pulling away and redirecting her energy toward a man who offers her something she feels you no longer do: excitement, mystery, status, or simply novelty. And novelty is powerful for women, because once the initial excitement of a relationship fades, many of them mistake the normal settling in phase for a loss of attraction, when in reality it's just life. Instead of working through it, they chase that new dopamine hit from someone else. Men tend to think that if a woman says she just fell out of love, it's an honest reflection of her feelings in that moment. It's not. That phrase is usually a cover for something much more calculated. She's already in love, or at least in lust, with someone else. The falling out phase for her doesn't happen after she leaves. It happens while she's still with you, during the weeks or months where she slowly detaches, starts resenting small things, and emotionally invests elsewhere. So when she finally ends things, she's not broken or grieving like you are, she's relieved. Why? Because she's been preparing for the new man. That's why women can look ice cold when they walk away from a relationship you thought was solid. She's not cold, she's already warm somewhere else. A lot of men get blindsided because they make the fatal mistake of thinking loyalty is based on the past. They think, we've been through so much together, she'd never do me like that. But women's loyalty is almost always conditional, tied directly to how you make them feel now. It's not about what you've provided in the past, how you supported her, or what sacrifices you made. The female brain is wired to assess the present and project into the future. If she no longer feels like you're the best option she can secure, her instincts start pushing her towards someone else. It's not always malicious in her mind. She frames it as doing what's best for her happiness. But from your perspective, it looks like betrayal, and in reality, it is. One of the most dangerous truths you need to accept is that women almost never leave to be alone. That's a fantasy men hold on to because it makes the betrayal sting less. They want to believe she's going to go off, think about what she's lost, and maybe come crawling back once she realizes her mistake. But that's not how female nature works. She might say she needs space or time to figure herself out, but in most cases, there's another man already in the picture, even if it's not yet physical. Women crave emotional security, and very few will walk away from a relationship without having another source of validation ready. That's why when you see her posting happy pictures just days after the breakup, It's not a sudden recovery, it's the reveal of what she's been hiding. Men are more likely to stay in a bad situation because they believe in loyalty and history. Women are more likely to move on quickly because they believe in momentum and opportunity. That's the sharp divide. If you're struggling, she doesn't see it as sticking with you through the storm. She sees it as wasting her prime years, and that phrase, prime years, is crucial. A woman's dating market value peaks far earlier than a man's, so she's hypersensitive to the idea of wasting time with someone who isn't getting her where she wants to be in life. That's why you see women in their 20s jumping from guy to guy so fast. They're operating on a clock that you don't feel ticking. Every man she dates is either a step forward toward the life she envisions or a step she's eager to replace. And don't think age changes this pattern much, it just changes the motivation. Younger women jump to upgrade their social status, lifestyle, or excitement level. Older women jump to reclaim lost time, avoid feeling invisible, or grab one last shot at passion before they feel it's gone forever. In both cases, the emotional mechanics are the same. They detach from one man while preparing to latch onto another. The key difference is that an older woman's urgency can be even more ruthless because she feels the walls closing in. That's why you'll see a woman in her late 30s or 40s blow up a perfectly stable marriage, not because she's miserable, but because she's chasing that fleeting high before she believes it's too late. The scariest part for most men to accept is that these jumps often happen before you've even noticed real problems. You could be in what you think is a great relationship. Intimacy is still there. Laughter is still there. You still do things together. And yet in the background, her interest is already being tested by a new presence. Maybe it's a guy at work who gives her subtle attention. Maybe it's an old flame who randomly reconnected. Maybe it's someone she met online. These aren't just harmless flirts. They are the spark that reignites her. What if curiosity? And once that switch flips, her emotional investment in you begins to erode no matter how well you treat her. And here's where most men completely self-destruct. They sense her pulling away, and instead of pulling back themselves, they go all in. They double down on attention, affection, and reassurance, thinking it will win her back. But to her, that just confirms the shift in power. She now knows she can alter your behavior with distance, and that makes you less attractive. The more you chase, the more you signal that you've noticed her detachment, which also signals you're afraid of losing her. That fear, ironically, speeds up the very process you're trying to stop. In her mind, she's already halfway out the door, and now you've just convinced her she's right to leave. What's often overlooked is how women emotionally justify these jumps to themselves. Rarely will they think, I'm betraying him. Instead, they'll convince themselves, I deserve to be happy, or this new connection feels so much more real than what I have now. They'll rewrite history in their head, painting the current relationship as stale, toxic, or emotionally unsupportive, even if none of that was true before the new man appeared. This is why women can make such clean breaks without looking back. In their mind, they've already replaced you both physically and morally. You are no longer the good man they're hurting, you're the guy who wasn't right for them. That mental reframing is what allows them to sleep at night after what looks to you like an act of pure disloyalty. And here's another bitter pill. Social media has made this process infinitely easier. Before, a woman had to physically meet men to test her market value. Now, she can have a rotation of admirers in her DMs without leaving her couch. That means she's constantly reminded that there are options out there. And if she's comparing those options to a man she feels has grown complacent, she's far more likely to make a jump. This is why you'll see women post thirst traps right before a breakup. It's not for you, it's for the potential replacements watching from the sidelines. She's priming the market before she announces she's single. You also need to understand that the new man doesn't have to actually be better than you in the long run. He just has to feel better in the moment. Women are highly responsive to emotional spikes, not logical calculations about who's the better partner overall. If he can make her feel desired, excited, or adventurous in ways you haven't lately, she'll overlook his flaws, at least temporarily. The novelty effect is intoxicating, and it blinds her to the stability and investment she's throwing away. But by the time she realizes the upgrade wasn't really an upgrade at all, you'll be long gone, and she'll be dealing with the fallout. The cruel irony is that many of these jumps end in disappointment, but that doesn't stop the behavior from repeating. A woman who's used to securing her next relationship before ending her current one is effectively addicted to the transition phase. That rush of escaping one relationship and entering another without a lonely gap is a dopamine hit. She'll chase again and again. So even if the new guy turns out to be worse, she'll eventually start prepping for her next jump rather than fix the relationship she's in. That's why some women have a long string of short-term relationships without ever truly being alone. The pattern itself is the addiction. The question you need to ask yourself as a man isn't how do I stop her from jumping, but how do I spot the signs early enough to protect myself? Because the truth is, you can't control female nature. You can't stop a woman who's wired this way from doing what she's going to do. What you can do is recognize the early indicators, sudden changes in appearance, secrecy about her phone, a shift in intimacy patterns, shorter conversations, less eye contact, or more unexplained absences. Each of these on its own might not mean much, but together they paint a picture you can't ignore. And once you see it clearly, your best move isn't to cling harder, it's to start detaching before she officially makes her move. One of the biggest mental shifts you must make as a man is accepting that a woman's departure is rarely about you suddenly losing value overnight. Instead, it's about her perception shifting over time, often due to a mix of boredom, temptation, and emotional fantasy building. When a woman starts imagining life with someone else, she doesn't need hard evidence that he's better. She just needs to believe the grass is greener. That belief is enough to make her justify walking away from a man who's been nothing but loyal. And here's the dark part: the better you've treated her, the more she feels she can safely burn the bridge, because she assumes you won't retaliate or tarnish her reputation. This is why being the nice guy often leaves you blindsided. You think her kindness will mirror yours, but when self-interest takes over, she can turn cold in ways you never expected. Men often think they're losing a competition to the other man, but in reality, they're losing to the feeling she gets when she interacts with him. This is why logic and comparison don't work. You could have a better career, better looks, and better stability, but if he gives her an emotional high that disrupts her current rhythm, she'll romanticize him regardless of reality. Women don't chase better men as much as they chase better moments. That's why so many of these jumps lead to worse long-term outcomes for them. They weren't evaluating the man as a whole, they were chasing the rush of novelty. Understanding this frees you from the destructive cycle of trying to outdo whoever she's interested in next. This also explains why a woman can seem deeply in love one month and completely detached the next. The shift isn't gradual for you, but it has been gradual for her. It just happens internally, away from your awareness. By the time you feel it, she's already months into her emotional withdrawal. That's why her sudden change feels so shocking and cruel. You're reacting to something she's been quietly preparing for. This is where most men make the fatal mistake of thinking they can remind her of how things used to be. But you can't fight nostalgia with nostalgia. Once she's idealized something else in her mind, the past doesn't have the same weight. Another brutal truth: many women keep backburner men, guys they've had flirtations with, exes who still check in, or platonic friends who they know would say yes if the door opened. This isn't always intentional betrayal, but it's a built-in escape hatch that allows her to leave without feeling like she's risking solitude. That safety net makes jumping much easier because she doesn't have to confront the fear of being alone. This is why women who constantly keep male friends or maintain strong ties to exes tend to move on at lightning speed. They've built an emotional safety mechanism in advance. The emotional rewiring that happens in this process is fascinating and devastating. Once a woman has emotionally connected to the new man, she starts detaching from you in small, almost invisible ways. She'll avoid deep conversations with you because she doesn't want to feel guilty. She'll resist intimacy, not because she doesn't want physical connection, but because physical closeness with you now feels disloyal to the fantasy she's building elsewhere. Eventually, she might even become irritable around you, looking for reasons to be upset so she can justify her emotional betrayal with moral outrage. She'll start telling herself, and maybe even her friends, that you're the problem, so that when she makes the jump, she feels like the victim instead of the betrayer. It's important to note that the speed of the jump doesn't always correlate to the length of the prior relationship. You might think, we've been together for years, there's no way she'd leave so fast. But history doesn't matter when the emotional switch flips. A woman can leave a 5-year relationship in a week if the new emotional connection feels strong enough. And that's because, in her mind, she hasn't been with you for months. She's been drifting toward the exit while still sharing a home, a bed, and a life with you. That's why it feels like she changed overnight, when in reality, you were just the last to know. From a masculine standpoint, the smartest move you can make when you notice these patterns isn't to confront her with accusations, but to quietly reposition yourself. If you sense she's preparing to jump, you begin withdrawing your energy, your time, and your emotional investment. You stop trying to win her back and instead focus on rebuilding your own foundation, not because it will necessarily make her stay, but because it protects you from the mental and emotional destruction that blindsides so many men. You can't control her choices. You can only control how much those choices destabilize you. And here's where most men miss the hidden power. Once you detach and stop chasing, you shift the dynamic entirely. Now, instead of her feeling like she's leaving an easy safety net, she's faced with the reality that you're no longer clinging to her presence. This alone can sometimes cause a woman to second-guess her jump, not out of loyalty, but out of fear that she might be losing something she assumed would always be there. Ironically, the less you try to stop her from leaving, the more she has to confront the possibility that leaving you might be a real loss. But whether she stays or goes, your mindset has to remain the same. You are not in the business of proving your worth to someone who's already mentally gone. If she jumps, she jumps. If she stays because she chooses to, not because you begged her to reconsider. The ability to hold that frame, to remain calm, unreactive, and self-respecting in the face of her detachment, is what separates men who spiral into self-doubt from men who walk away with their dignity intact. And that dignity is what will keep you grounded long after she's moved on. The harsh but liberating truth is this: women who jump from man to man will never truly be satisfied, because satisfaction requires depth, and depth requires staying through both highs and lows. They'll chase the highs until they burn themselves out, and by then, the men they left will have moved on to better lives. Your job isn't to become the man she never leaves. Your job is to become the man who can't be destroyed when she does. Once you internalize that, her ability to hurt you vanishes. You stop fearing the jump, you start seeing it for what it is, her nature, not your failure. And when you can look at it that way, you've already won.